Welcome to this week's episode of RNT Fitness Radio. And on the line this week, we have Swede Burns. Swede Burns is, he's competed in powerlifting, he's competed in bodybuilding. By his own admission throughout the podcast, he's been to jail, which led to him developing the fifth set training method that he's written a book on. You guys can read and research after the podcast. We talk about the three needs and desires that human beings have. We discuss our love for Krispy Kremes and bourbon. Overall, this is a really well-rounded episode with training, nutrition, psychology, you name it, we've covered it. I really hope you enjoy this one as much as Akash and I did. If you have any feedback as always, or you would like to make any suggestions on guests that you would like to hear from, please just either drop us a DM or leave it in the podcast review.
Okay, so for me, I started competing, my competitive career in powerlifting when I was in high school. I did my first two meets in high school. I was maybe 16 and 18, but they were about just over a year apart. So towards the end of my 16th year and towards the beginning of my 18th year. Right after that, I thought the bodybuilding would be the next logical step. You know, I progressed right into competing in bodybuilding, which I'd always wanted to do since I was very young. I started lifting at a very, very young age, maybe 11, 12 years old. I had a weight set at home, and I worked out in the basement. And I was consistent, every single day I trained.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't really understand how it worked, at that point. I was at a very rudimentary understanding. I actually believed at that time when I was a child that, that if I missed a few days that I would get weaker or smaller. Mm-hmm. So I never missed at all. For probably 4 years, I did like overhead presses and bench presses and barbell rows for every day.
Every day.
I did those. So when I started doing powerlifting training in high school, I was a natural. I just took to it very well, and I was very strong. I benched over 400 pounds in high school in a meet. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah, as a very young man.
Some natural strength there, then.
Yeah, I had a lot of potential for it, and I totaled 1,400 at a very young age too when I was 16, and 1,600 at 18 years old, which is phenomenal. And that's without a belt or wraps, for someone who was under 200 pounds in high school, that was pretty impressive. It was way better than anyone else. So from that, I was like, okay, well, I figured I pretty much tapped out this powerlifting thing because I didn't know how good people really were out there. I knew there was like Ed Cones and stuff like that, but I didn't think it was a very popular thing. I didn't know many people were involved in it outside of high school. So I wanted to get into bodybuilding. So I got ready for a bodybuilding show. I did a lot of research on body composition and how to improve body composition. And I was in a group with a guy named Lyle McDonald.
Oh yeah, big fan of him. Yeah.
Oh, actually, yeah. Okay, so I was friends with Lyle McDonald back then. I was actually on the list that he credits when he wrote the first low carb book.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, the low carb diet book.
How did you get to know him?
Long from that list, long before the book ever came out. In fact, he used everything that we did in that list for the book. Now, this is before chat rooms. This is before the internet as it is today. Back then, if you wanted to be involved in a group with a bunch of other people from different places, you had to get on what was called a list. And there was a company called Listserv. I think it was listserv.com or something like that. And it was low carb L at Listserv. That was the name of the list, and it was people who were doctors and people that were personal trainers. Everyone that, basically the one thing we all had in common was we used low carb diets with ourselves or our clients. Yeah. And it was the birth of the keto craze. Where keto got crazy again right around that time, and everyone was using it for bodybuilding. So when I got into bodybuilding, doing a cycled ketogenic diet was logical. For me, because I already knew so much about it from doing that list for so many years to improve my own body composition. And that was how I dieted when I was training for powerlifting when I was younger, and that was how I dieted for my first bodybuilding show. And I got in really good shape. I won. It was a teen show. I won for the teens. It was an NPC, which for us, that's the...
Yeah. It's the equivalent to UKBFF here.
Yeah, that's the one that you would turn pro in.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, the big fed, the main one.
Yeah, exactly. So we have, in the United States, the way it's set up is we have these little tiny kind of federations that aren't taken very seriously, the ones that are all like different branches, and most of those are like natural federations. Now NPC offers natural too. They do drug testing for certain divisions over here. But this was the one that was like, this was like a real show. So I remember the guy who helped me didn't think I was going to do very well in it. You know, he thought, you know, this is your first show, so be ready not to do well. And my mindset, my attitude was that I didn't want that to be the case. I wanted to do, you know, I wanted to win, or I wasn't going to do it. And I did. You know, I actually was able to win for my class and for the teen division. And there were some other guys that were really good. I remember being at the show and being scared, you know, and thinking like, wow, okay, I wasn't ready for everybody to be this good, but I still was able to pull it off. And there was a moment there when I was on stage where I was like, okay, this is for me. You know, this is what I want to do. This is what I want, you know, who doesn't like to win, you know? So I shift all of my forces, all of my direction, all my energies toward that. And the next 7 years were just bodybuilding. And I finished, I got 10th place in the super heavyweight at a national level contest in the United States.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a very good bodybuilder. You know, maybe there's an argument I was a much better bodybuilder than a powerlifter.
Yeah.
But I you know, that was when I started coaching with bodybuilding. So the first thing I did, like in a teaching role, was I would start working with people who, you know, wanted to do as good as I did in bodybuilding. And I put a room in my house. I had a sort of an office with mirrors, and I'll bring people over to help them with posing. I worked with on their diet, and I did their prep with them for bodybuilding contests. And that was the first time that I ever really got any joy out of competition. Prior to that, it was just a very unhealthy thing for me. I felt like my mindset, my personality, I had no balance. You know, I'm the type of person that I have a goal, and all I can see is that goal, and I fixate on that and obsess, and everything and everyone else in my life suffers. And this was the first time that I ever had turned the camera around and put it on someone else and put my energies towards helping another person. And that was, I think it didn't click at the time, but I can look back and see that was a turning point in my life, or maybe the first time I realized that my place is something that people don't want to accept. You know, it's not the sort of thing that people talk about becoming when they're kids. You know, like, I'm not the person that's going to be on the stage or the platform. I'm going to be over to the side.
Yeah.
And I mean, I looked at it like I was always still going to continue to compete, but that was the turning point when I started to realize that it was a lot healthier for me, and that I was maybe more called to be a teacher or coach. And you know, as someone who, when I was young, God, I hated teachers. I hated the idea of any type of authority figure. You know, I was a very rebellious child, even into my youth. You know, I had a lot of problems with the law and everything else. And it's, you know, it's funny to see that is actually what I was called to do, is to be a teacher.
Funny, eh? So it was what, 7 years into competing, you said?
7 years into bodybuilding, and that was when I decided I knew I never wanted to compete again. I was just disenchanted. The whole thing just became, you know, I saw the people that I looked up to. There was a moment, I remember there was a turning point where I had this sort of the end of, you know, the Yellow Brick Road moment, where like, you know, at the end of the movie where the old man is behind the curtain working the gears, and it's just this little guy, the Mighty Oz, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what bodybuilding became for me. I realized that nothing was what I thought it was. The things that got me, you know, that I fell in love with about bodybuilding, the people who were my heroes became my peers, and they weren't what I thought they were. You know, there was a lot of stuff about it that I really didn't like, and the achievement itself didn't give me what I was looking for with it. But I felt like I was much more suited and much happier to help people do it, you know, and focus on being a little bit more emotionally healthy about the way that they train for competition.
Yeah. So did you transition back to powerlifting then?
Well, that came in time. But yeah, I transitioned back into working with powerlifters. And as soon as I did that, it was like night and day, because there were certain things about bodybuilding that never really clicked with me. I've always been super interested in being as strong as possible. And the reason that I wanted to have, you know, big muscles, I wanted to be 285 pounds in shape. I wanted to look the way that I want, and I want to be able to perform that same way. I wanted to be able to have that strength to go with it. And in bodybuilding, it always surprised me. I would train with these guys who were like on my level or even bigger, more developed than me. And they were just so weak compared to me. Because I was training. My training always had sort of a focus on strength. You know? So I would work out with guys like, you know, a good friend of mine, Dave Palumbo, who was, you know, I trained with a long time and helped me. I'm sure you guys know Dave Palumbo.
Yeah. Huge advocate of ketogenic dieting. His own sort of spin on it as such. Right. Actually, all the stuff with Lyle was before I ever met Dave, and Dave and I became great friends. You know, he helped me for many years, and I learned a lot from him, and I took a lot of what he taught me, and you know, went my own direction with it. But very, very smart guy. You know. But yeah, I remember training with him, and we would do inclines for chest. We would be doing incline barbell bench press, and he'd go up to 275, and like his last set was with like 275, and I'm like, man, I do like a few sets with 405 for 8, you know. And I was 22 years old, you know. So I was like, I guess I'll just keep going, and he'd move on to the next thing. And that's what we would do when we trained. Like I would have like 4 more sets when he was done. I'm still moving up in weight, you know. More like a cardio workout. I have to strip the weights back on and off for you too, right?
Well, because I did that stuff too, but then I would just have to keep going because I was still right up. You know?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And he wanted to doing dumbbells or something. But I can remember there were a couple moments where there were these guys that were just, you know, at that time he was probably over 300 pounds in shape. You know,
yeah.
So he's a lot shorter than me, so he was definitely more developed than me. I was in shape around 285, 290, and I'm also 6'2", so he's like probably 5'9", 5'8", so 300 pounds on him is insane looking. It looks like the incredible. Yeah, he was gigantic that time period. But I can remember thinking like, how are people this developed and this jacked, and they're not really using the same weights as me, you know? Mm-hmm. You know, obviously I learned about that over the years, and you know, I write about the different types of hypertrophy and the different stimulus that you can use to develop muscle without necessarily having that neurological component of strength, you know?
Yeah.
And, so it was interesting. And I just always felt like I was a little bit out of place, that wasn't something that anybody cared about but me. But when I got back into powerlifting, man, I had a whole lot of muscle to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. But I still stayed in the role of a coach for a while. And 2010, I started to compete again. And I only did that because the only reason I got back on platform at all was because I wanted to sort of be able to lead from the front as a coach and show people that I actually was able to perform the way that I taught other people to, you know. And I've done some notable things. I benched 250 kilos. You know, it's just 551 pounds raw. Yeah. I'm a pretty strong guy, but I'm not what I would consider to be a good power lifter, because there are guys now that are just so outstanding that's like a blip.
Yeah.
To the average person, my lifts are very impressive. You know, like
now you got some freaks doing 700 pounds, right?
Yeah, I mean, most. There's a lot of guys. There's a handful of guys that are on the precipice of 700 and 1 or 2, right? 3 over ever, and. Yeah, so it's pretty crazy to see when you see that stuff. You know, in comparison, my lifts, like a 765 deadlift is impressive. You know, but when you look at that deadlift compared to the fact that there's guys, I just had my meet here was this weekend. That meet, powerlifting meet, that I put that on here is for people that use my method of training. You know, we wanted to put together a meet for everybody to come from all over the place. And we had a dude there bench 6 raw, 10 pounds raw. 915-pound deadlift raw.
Yeah.
You know, like without equipment. So I see, and that guy that pulled 915 was 22 years old. So
22.
Freak.
Wow.
Yeah. The thing is, when you look at it, you got to think of it like a bell curve. You know, the more people that you get involved in that aspect of the sport, the more outliers are going to present. You know, the more freaks on the far right side of the bell curve. And there's a lot of them out there, you know, and now that more people are doing it, it's kind of embarrassing to see what we thought was good at one point is average, you know.
So you said this meet was for the people that are using your method. Is this the 5th set method you formulated?
Yeah, exactly. The 5th set methodology.
And how did that come about? How did you formulate that?
Well, okay, so it started, the roots of it were, after I was out of bodybuilding, I ended up getting in some trouble with the law because I was still completely out of hand.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. I went to prison. And when I was in prison, that was when we had very, very limited equipment, you know, very rudimentary training stuff. We just had bars, and the increments were crude at best. There was like plates that were welded back together that had been broken. It was not a situation where we had access to really good equipment. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't a lot of options. There were barbells, there was a bench, you know, there was a squat rack, stuff like that. So it wasn't, it didn't have access to the stuff I was used to. So I did a lot of research, and I used something that's called the Prilepin chart to figure out how much volume we would need to get stronger, the people that I was training with in there. And I put together a novel way to self-regulate so that everybody could train together based off of percentages of 1 rep max. And I put in sort of a fail-safe, we call a fail-out feature, which is essentially a stopgap that will prevent, you know, a lifter from accumulating too much fatigue in a training cycle. So the idea was that, you know, we had to do the best we could with this specific type of training. And that's exactly what it was, very specific to the sport of powerlifting, benching, squatting, and deadlifting. Mm-hmm. So whereas normally what was in vogue at that time, and even very much so until recently, was doing different variations, maxing these different variations and doing sort of a conjugate type of program. West Side Barbell and these guys do. I didn't have the choice and the option to do that. So I fell into a more specific way of training, and the results were extraordinary. You know, everybody did very well with it. And when I was eventually released from prison after a few years, I continued with that, with the 5th set model. And I tried to add different things back in and a bunch of variations, and I found that nothing worked as well as what we had done originally. So I was working as a coach professionally, and you know, people, different athletes, and so forth. And that was a very good general program for people to use, even though it was non-specific for athletes, for sports. So it worked very well in that way as well. And then I started working again with powerlifters. That was when I decided I was going to compete in powerlifting again around 2010, just so people could see that I was actually able to do, you know, kind of walk the walk as well. You know, you don't got to be the best lifter in the world, but you got to be able to execute if you want people to respect you. You know, the things that you're teaching. And so I did that. And I fell back in love with competition again. Maybe it wasn't the best thing for me to get back into it like that again, full force, but, you know, I got a lot of lessons out of it. And, you know, my body's devastated. I've been doing this stuff I've been competing for 22 years, you know, in bodybuilding or strength sports. So, you know, I'm pretty torn to pieces at this point. I'm an old man.
Can you give us, for people listening, can you give like a brief overview of how you set your method up?
Okay.
We're talking about that, but
I'll give you a high level overview of what it looks like.
Yeah, perfect.
Basically a method is a series of protocols that are applied together, given a series of rules that have to be followed. And the idea is it keeps you from doing dumb stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of meant to be foolproof. Nothing's foolproof, but if you follow the rules, you know, there's a lot less of a likelihood that you're going to run yourself into the ground, or that you're going to be wasting energies on things that are not necessarily the best trade-off, you know, for your resources. So, in other words, a lot of what we're doing is very specific, not just the sport of powerlifting, but for strength. However, it is considered a concurrent form of periodization. We are training multiple capacities at once. So there is a very big emphasis on hypertrophy for this program as well. So if you look at 5th set lifters, most of them are really jacked. A lot of them look like bodybuilders. And the reason for that is that we're doing a nice amount of volume for most of the year. Whereas for a long time, the majority of powerlifting training, people were just training over 90%, you know, of their 1 rep max. Very, very low repetition training, very low volume, very high intensity. if anything, I would, I'm proud of the fact that I brought people back into the idea of base building, the idea of doing a lot of volume in their training for most of the year and establish a foundation to later move into that very intense training. So it is a sort of phased approach to training. There are periods. I have something called the MSM sequence. First of all, MSMs are mechanically similar movements, which we do allow in fifth set, not for the main work though. So that will be like secondary work. But for bench press, that would look like a board press maybe, or something with shorter range motion, or a different variation that would somehow protect the lifter doing additional volume. So it's probably going to remove the most vulnerable portion of the movement for the secondary stuff, and it's going to allow you to push into a little bit of additional volume. Okay, probably the best way to do that usually would be to reduce the range of motion and remove the part where the lifter's most vulnerable. So on a bench press, that would be at the chest. So after the lift had already executed all of their main fifth set work and moved on to their secondary stuff, maybe a board press would be a good way to reduce the range of motion and remove sort of the most vulnerable portion of the lift and allow them to do a little bit of additional volume. So with that in mind, the main work is essentially set up to be, there's a couple different options for protocols, but the most popular, the original fifth set protocol, was 4 sets of 2 repetitions, so 4 doubles, starting at 80% of the 1 rep max. And then that is followed by a fifth set of as many reps as possible. So the idea is whatever's left in the tank, you're able to get that out there. There's a neural adaptation effect, okay, within the workout, within the session, of doing those doubles. There's no breakdown. The way the Prolepin chart was set up was, he's a guy, he was a coach who observed thousands of lifters, thousands of attempts, and made a chart of where lifters tended to break down and lose technique at a certain percentage range. So how many reps per set they would start to fall apart. So in other words, he noticed that at 80% or over, anything between 80 and 85%, anything more than 3 reps, so it would be 2 to 3 reps was the range that they should be training, and anything more than 3, technique would begin to degrade. Now, I understood the idea of post-activation potentiation and, the idea that, you can improve performance within a session by sticking to those guidelines. And I experimented with, I was curious about whether or not you would be able to use that as a tool as like an activation tool, that would have a 2-pronged effect. You could get your volume out the way that you needed, which is what you do with those 4 sets of 2. But those 4 sets of 2 also sort of primed you for a fifth set where you'd be going further. And the result was, it was surprising that it worked as well as it did. It was what I wanted to happen, but it worked much better than I expected. People were able to hold it together for a set of 6, 10 reps at what is a very high relative percentage, and not have any breakdown. And it was a result of the precedent sets. So that's really, in short, that's the beauty of the system and how it works. There are a lot of different protocols. There's one where we'll do like the 75% protocol, where you're starting with 75% of the 1 rep max, and it's triples instead of doubles. So there's 4 triples. So that allows for more volume during that initial loading session, and it's still well within strength parameters in terms of the percentages. So you're still training for strength. You're still going to get that strength effect. And still, that's a very high percentage range of training, and most bodybuilders never even really touch that range. And but the thing is, it's extremely effective for hypertrophy. Raw powerlifting, I was fortunate in that I fell into this in a time when raw powerlifting became very popular, because it wasn't even a thing really when I started. I did raw because I didn't know how to use gear well. And gear is very protective, powerlifting gear. Like wearing a bench press shirt, it provides a very strong internally rotating force that protects the shoulders. It basically stretches as you come down. Without that, you're left with simply soft tissue to protect you from injuries. So if you have soft tissue insufficiencies or underdevelopment, you're lacking in muscular development, the likelihood, that's a risk factor for injury. The likelihood of getting hurt is pretty high. So this sort of training became a necessity. You had to develop that level of musculature in order to have a career in powerlifting now that everybody's raw. And the entire sport has gone raw. There's over 19,000 American powerlifters that compete raw, and there's roughly 200 in multiply, and maybe 1,800 in single ply. So if you look at it, there's really no one else. There's no one that's not raw. So the sport went this direction. It really took a dramatic right turn this direction right around the time I released the first fifth set book. So it caught on like wildfire.
Yeah, you got named Coach of the Year, right? On the Elite FTS.
No, it wasn't Elite FTS that did that. That was PowerliftingWatch.com.
Oh, it's Powerlifting Watch. Okay, cool.
Yeah, they had actually they did a vote. It was a vote, and I got over 6,000 votes.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
It blew my mind. I went from 2 years prior to that, the only people that really knew who I was were like in the trenches powerlifters who would see me at meets. Just suddenly, like when I released Fifth Set in 2015, the first book, it took off.
Yeah, that was the first time I heard of you. It came out on Elite FTS. They advertised it.
Yeah. Elite sold. They had exclusive rights to sell it initially. Now it's on Amazon and stuff too. Which is
okay, great.
Some other countries, a lot of people would reach out and be like, "Oh, how do I get the book?" And I'm like, "Elite." And they had issues with paying, because it was different.
Was that your first product or book that you wrote?
Not my first book, but my first product. Yeah, I've been a writer my whole life. I'm sure you guys have heard of RX Muscle, right?
Yeah.
I was one of the first staff writers in RX Muscle.
The first what? Sorry,
one of the first staff writers.
Okay.
Oh, wow. So when Dave and John split from MD, right?
No, this is back when it was a print magazine.
Oh, okay.
Prior to MD. So going back.
This is back in the
going
day.
back to probably 2002 is when this was.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is before it was an internet site. It was actually a print magazine. Okay, like back when like Flex and all of Muscle Development and all these magazines.
Oh wow! See, I was following John and Dave back when they were writing at MD.
Right.
And I knew they fell out with like Steve Bleckman, and then I thought they had set RX up off the back of that online. But, I didn't know it was going before that.
No, it was actually before he was with. Yeah, he worked for Bleckman and all that, and did the muscular development website.
Yeah.
But prior to that, there was RX Muscle magazine, which we were at the Arnold. We had booths. It was a regular subscription magazine. Cool, so that was 2002, 2003, something like that. Yeah. I was in the first issues of that, writing, and I've been writing my whole life too. I started writing very young, roughly the same time that I started lifting weights. So when I was a child, I can remember reading Charles Bukowski books and stuff as a little kid, and not really even understanding what was going on, like being like, just knew it was something different and interesting to me that this guy was like getting drunk and fighting people. And
would you use it as an outlet, the writing and the lifting?
Writing has definitely been about catharsis for me my entire life. I'm releasing a book of poetry on May 11th.
On May
11th.
Okay.
May 11th.
Oh, May 11th. Okay.
Yeah, it's called Clues About Ghosts. So that's I'm excited to get that out too, man. Because whenever I do that type of work, it's about catharsis. It's about closure and moving on with from a different chapter of my life and so forth. I've been writing memoirs most of my life. I write a lot of fiction stuff too, but yeah, this was the first thing I'd ever written that was sort of a manual, something that was a product, and it went very well. Most people, I think the issue that most people have when they want to write an ebook, they might be very talented as a lifter or maybe even know a lot of experience, is that they're not really able to communicate very well in writing.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. Like, I'm sure you've read some ebooks where you're
it's painful. Yeah.
What the hell is this? Garbage, It's like not even intelligible, Might be very talented, somebody might be very talented as a lifter. And that brings along another really good point, is that you can be a tremendously talented lifter and not know your ass from a hole in the ground when it comes to why you're able to perform,
Yeah, 100%.
You can do very well, on talent, And that doesn't mean that you're ever going to be able to tell anyone else how to do well, because you don't even really necessarily know what you're doing yourself. And a lot of times these people are good in spite of what they're doing, not because of it.
And the danger is people get sucked into that because they see this person being this success, and
it's my hero, you know?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I want to be like this guy. I want to be like this guy. I got to listen to what he does.
Yeah, automatically they've got authority status, right?
Right, and he doesn't know any idea what that's the thing is. I'll put it to you this way, you know, when I was in high school, and I told you I could total pretty well. I could bench all that weight, you know, I could do stuff that other people were just not able to do. What if they came to me and they're like, you know, hey, can you teach me to do that? I don't have any fucking idea what I did to do that. I just trained, I just lifted weights and got better. Now, on the other side of the coin, at a very young age, you know, I started to pick up on this because I would see people that were extremely talented and the stuff they were doing was just not necessarily logical. It didn't make sense to me. I've always been a why person, you know. I would ask why, you know. And I don't think that someone who's talented, who's been training for 20 years has nothing to offer. I think you probably have something to learn from everybody. It's just not going to necessarily be the stuff that you want, that you're looking for, that you'd expect. You know, maybe it's sometimes it's the things not to do. So I always tell people that, you know, your goal as a student is to become a discerner, you know, to learn who to listen to, who not to listen to. Yeah. You know, take the meat from any situation and just spit the bone out. Like, what is going to be good that I can take from this and what is not, you know? And unfortunately, experience is the best way to develop those skills, those characteristics. So you got to make some mistakes, but ideally you would want to learn from the mistakes of the people that came before you, you know, and not fall into the same pit holes. So I tried my best to identify people that seemed like they knew what they were doing and who could answer the why questions that I had. And I learned as much as I could from as many of those as possible. You know, I drove hours to train with Dave and other people in bodybuilding that were really good, great Kovacs. And, you know, I did everything in my power to learn as much as I could, you know. And as a result, I'm pretty well rounded. It doesn't always turn out that way. But, you know, it kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
You have to consider the source, you know.
Go back to writing a second. Are you the sort of person that just picks up the laptop and just types away, or do you do something to sort of get you in the zone for it? Do you pre-plan? How do you writing projects? I
don't just pick up to answer the question, I don't just pick it up and start. I think you'll find most writers have like rituals that they do.
The reason I ask is actually we were talking to a writer yesterday, Lou Schuler, and when we asked him, I was expecting a process, but he actually said he does it for like 12 hours a day. He's like, so you just get it done sort of thing.
Okay.
He actually didn't, whereas Akash has a process. I'm guessing you're about to allude to the fact that you've got a process, whereas the guy yesterday actually completely threw me off.
Well, I'll put it like this. I never stop writing, you know. I write over 1,000 words a day every day. But I wouldn't consider that the actual work because it's sort of just flowing out of me all day. Yeah. So now in the digital age, I have my iPhone with me and I'm writing notes constantly. You know, I might think of it, even just a sentence or the way I like some words put together, and I'll write them down and I'll put them into my notes. Or I might think of part of a story that I want to include in something, or something that's important that I need to include for a project. So I've got maybe 30 or 40 files in my notes. And I'll just go into that file and include those notes. Or maybe I'll write the note real quick and drag it into that file. But what I used to do before this, which was not that long ago, I always carried a notepad in my back pocket. And I had a little notepad and a pen in my back pocket with me everywhere I went for 20 years. And I would just write little things down that were important. And even if they were just notes about something that I wanted to write about, you know, later. But I've always had sort of a process where I would sit down somewhere and get in the zone and actually focus on, okay, because I have to shut everything else off. I have to sort of empty myself of all the other things to focus on the project. There could be some other things that are, you know, marginal, periphery, but really I need to be focused, you know, maybe 95% of my being has to be focused on what the project is.
And so do you have like a time that you find suits you?
Time?
Yeah, as in, for example, again, Akash works very early in the morning. I'm actually most productive at like 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I like to work at night. So what I'll do is I go to either a Dunkin' or a Starbucks. There's another thing about it is I like to be in public, but I don't want to be with anyone. I just like to be somewhere where things are happening. And that seems to help me be able to focus. So I'll be at a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks, which is these are like coffee places.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys got.
We've got Starbucks. I know I've been to New York and stuff, so I definitely know Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay, good. Dunkin' is great.
Unfortunately, it hasn't quite made it as big over here, but Starbucks is everywhere.
Right, it's the Eastern United States thing. You know, there's some places around in the United States where you can't get it either because I travel constantly, so I'm always in different states and I'm trying to find Dunkin' Donuts because that's definitely my favorite. But anyway, I'll sit there. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I can focus on my own thing, you know, on what I'm doing, and I seem to be able to be the most productive between probably 5 p.m. and where I'm at now. They let me stay late, so I'm in there for probably 8 hours a day. I'll be there till 12 or so.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I work for, you know, I do video review and stuff too, but even that is writing because I'm communicating with people after I watch the videos. I'll get all that stuff out of the way first, all my coaching work and my normal work before I write, you know. And I have a column, you know, on the Lead FTS. You know, there's over 100,000 words of content on there, you know. So I'm always writing that, always writing for that. And then I'm also working on my own side projects. Like obviously the poetry book that I'm going to release in a couple weeks was one of them. So I write screenplays. I'm in the middle of my second novel right now. So that's a fiction novel, but it's something that I might actually want to do a screenplay for also.
Sweet. What kind of topics are you covering in your non-fitness work? So your poems and your screenplays.
I would say in 2 words, intimacy and despair. You know, those 2 things I find to be inextricably linked. And that's the most interesting thing to me. So I focus on those topics. You know, just intimacy, the needs that humans have for intimacy, connect with other humans, and the inevitable despair that's attached to that. You know, in one way or the other, be it with loss or be it with realization that what we wanted is not really what we wanted.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of a paradox of the human condition. Yeah. So that's usually the stories that I tell revolve around that topic. I think the humans, we just have this sort of need to find things so that we can lose them, be it people, love, possessions, whatever, success.
Interesting.
We're driven to find things that we can lose. And so that it makes a really good story, you know, to cover that.
So I guess you and Paul must have some pretty deep conversations because we had him on our podcast. Obviously, who recommended you.
Paul's my friend, man. I love him very much.
Yeah, it was one of the best podcasts that we've recorded. I've had so many messages since it saying,
"Oh, good."
Yeah, because we brought it away a little bit away from training, and you know, he opened up about.
That's where the good stuff happens, you know.
Yeah, it was
I mean, we all can have that in common and love training, but there's only so much to say about it.
Yeah.
We've been doing it and you've been teaching. I mean, when you get too far away from the things that make you see, I'm more concerned with why you love something than the thing itself, the motivations. Like and that's something that when I start working with a new client, the first thing I ask is like, what got you training?
Yeah.
And the second thing I ask is what keeps you training? You know, and they're just those 2 questions can tell you so much about someone. The training itself is, you know, it's more of a science, but I'm more concerned with the art of it because if it was just so simple that you could say, okay, do these things and you'll get better, everyone would do it. And you really can say, hey, do these things and you'll get better. But everyone's not necessarily able to do it because you have to connect with what is making them, what are the issues that they're running into, what are the pitfalls that they're running into, what's going to make them continue to do this. The biggest issue is not finding the right program or finding the right diet. The biggest issue is always adherence, and that comes down to motivation. Yeah. So working as a coach, it's very simple when you can get to know somebody, when you can foster relationships and, you know, sort of learn to connect with people on an individual basis. That's when you can that's where the magic happens. So all the other stuff is sort of mechanized. You know, I'm big on systems. So I systemize things and I test and I research and I try to get as large of a sample size as possible and get as much good data as I can and look at it objectively and make decisions and move forward based on that, and sort of systemize it. So it doesn't necessarily every decision can make itself. It's very effective, but the result is it's very boring. So we have to find a way to make people care about it, and that's what I do. That's what I do with the training stuff. And that's what I'm interested in when I talk to people. Is I'll talk to you all day about how you feel about how a lift went or how your training went. How that affected you. But I'm less interested in the actual numbers.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm not going to be impressed by any. There's a handful of people in the world that can throw a number out there that I'm like, wow, I can't believe that.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm more interested in experiences.
So I know it's going to be hugely, independent, but do you see common traits that clients that come to you have as their why they train? Is there a common theme?
Yeah. I mean, there's, like you said, there's definitely different individuals out there. The people that are most successful, I don't want to say that none of them are like mentally balanced and very healthy, but most of them are not. Mm-hmm. For most people, it's an outlet, and it's more of a need. It's more of a need than a hobby. It's like I said, it's a means of catharsis. It becomes something that they need because in order to continue to function, it's a type of therapy. For the people that are the most successful, talent aside, you can have all the talent in the world, and if you don't have drive, you're not going to go very far. I have seen that, sadly, I've seen that myself many times. That's one of the most heartbreaking things is to see somebody who's got all this talent. They're so gifted, they're able to just make progress at such an extraordinary level. And they can't stop messing up with things outside of their training, just in their lives, they're a mess. And they eventually fall off and don't stick with it. So, to me, I think that you have to, as a coach, the goal should be to try and find what that person's need is and learn how to work that, learn how to work that in a way that's sustainable, and that's what I try to do that. I try my best to do that, but yeah, everyone's similar. We all have the same needs. Like, look at it like this. If you break it down to a very basic human level, what do people need? What do people want? We want affection, concern, and respect. That's really it. We want to be respected because we feel like we're good at something. We want to be respected as an individual, as someone who provides some unique value. It can't be, the only value can't be your total, or it can't be your placing in a bodybuilding contest. It can't be. It's a very unhealthy paradigm, so that's where the concern and respect, the concern and affection come into play, if you can balance those three things, those are really the three basic human needs,
mm-hmm.
And, find a way to do that. Basically, everyone's coming for that. Most people don't realize they're coming for that. And they focus on the one thing, the respect thing. They want to be admired and revered. But without the other two, it's very difficult to achieve that,
Yeah.
Because it's hard to get to the end result that people are going to respect if you don't have those other two things. I have like sort of a hierarchy for the people I work with of priorities. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the way I tell them is this: family has to be the first thing in the priorities, right?
Yeah.
Work has to be the second thing. So behind those two, you have the potential for a third thing, which could be your lifting or whatever other thing you would like, But if that list ever gets skewed, the order that it's in, you're screwed. There's no way for you to be successful.
Yeah.
Because without the job, you're not gonna have the family. You're not gonna be able to take care of your family or yourself. So if the job comes before the family, you're screwed. If the training or the sport comes before either of those other two, it's a recipe for disaster. So you need to have that stuff. You need to have the other things, the affection and concern. And then you can have a third endeavor that you might use to garner respect. Or maybe the first two things are going to be the thing that gets you the respect, to be a family man, to be somebody who has these relationships and so forth. Like for me, that's what coaching has become. That's taken the place of a family for me. I'm not married, so my family is the people I work with, and I treat them that way. And that's allowed me to be really good at what I do.
Yeah.
Well,
what led you down the path of sort of like learning all of this and spending time researching this? Was it like a learning curve at some point? Like,
I told you I'm a questions guy, you know?
Yeah.
So I've always been that way. I've always, I've always wanted to know why. And not just in this, but with everything, every endeavor, I've always wanted to know, like, how does that happen? What makes that work, you know?
Yeah.
And so that curiosity drove me to do a lot of research and, experimentation and to play with things. And I keep really good records. I'm neurotic, meticulous record keeping. So I'll always go back and look at everything that I did with myself or people I worked with and sort of analyze and figure out what, problem solving is something that I've always been interested in too. Mm-hmm. So that's what drove me to do it, is that it's just a matter of curiosity.
Yeah.
And different attributes, different traits that I just have, that I've always had, that came together in such a way that, I'm a very good problem solver.
Yeah.
And, so that's what, it was a very natural process. I always say in anything in life, like if you have to force it, you're probably not meant to do it. You should. If you get up in the morning and you find yourself forcing yourself to do what it is that you have to do, you'd be a lot more effective at something else. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough that I fell into a role where everything just kind of fell into place for me in terms of that. I mean, I've had a very difficult life. Not to say that things have been easy for me at all, because they've not. But in terms of my role, who I am as a man, as a person, as a coach, that was a very natural progression. That was something that just evolved and became what it is. Mm-hmm. Everybody has character traits. Mine, when you lay them out and add them up, the result is coach, or maybe therapist. I don't know, but I don't have the training for that. It was a very natural thing. I think I've never seen someone who says, like, I really want to do this thing and I suck at it and I hate the training that I have to do for it. I hate the research that I have to do for it, and then they're successful at it. It usually doesn't work that way.
No.
It has to be something that you're kind of following your heart, and that was what I did.
Yeah. So Akash and I are in our sort of mid to late 20s. If you could go back and you could advise yourself around this time, sort of in your life, what would you tell yourself?
Oh God.
or even us.
My advice to myself would not be my advice to you, because you probably don't have the same problems that I have. But generally speaking, I would say that to have a priority system, have yourself, establish a very rigid and strong system of values, or later in life you'll regret it. Mm-hmm. Prioritize things the way that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And that's sort of your own. You have to have your own code. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be everyone else's code, but you have to have a code and you have to stick to it. And that's what integrity is. Is sticking to your own code, sticking to your own rules. And I didn't do that early enough in life. And I'm grateful that once I was able to identify that and make those changes, the direction of my life changed dramatically, and I was able to finally, for the first time, be happy.
Yeah.
Not happy because of a victory, but because of
you found the code. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. My life is, I live my life in a way, as long as I don't go outside of my own code,
You're good with that.
I'm happy. Yeah, I can function. I can be happy. I can look forward to another day. That's a pretty good place to be. And it took me a long time to get there. Everybody's story is not the same as mine, but I think that lesson can be applied to everyone individually.
For sure. Let's switch gears and take things in a different direction. We'll finish on rapid fire questions. So just 3 of these. So the first one is, say you were next in a strict dieting phase, say you had to make weight for a class or something. Mm-hmm. Once the meat's done, what would be your go-to meal right afterwards?
Well, when I did bodybuilding, it was donuts. I would always go.
The love for Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts.
Not Dunkin'. I think Dunkin' Donuts are trash, honestly. I don't even like
I'm glad you said that because I tried them in New York. I was so excited. Took my laptop,
Garbage.
did some work. The donuts were overrated. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I know that they make the Dunkin' Donuts the day before, and then they put them up on there, so they're already a day old. But my favorite donuts were Krispy Kreme.
Yes.
Okay, so
they're huge over here. Yeah.
I would drive from. I remember I did a bodybuilding contest in Delaware, and I drove an hour right from the contest. I had like some of the snacks and stuff you have during the contest, like cake, peanut butter, but I was ready when it was done. My girlfriend at the time, maybe I was 20 years old, drove an hour to get to the Krispy Kreme, and when we got there, the hot light was on, and it was like one of those, the hot light that means coming out of the oven.
You got one. Yeah.
So they had a deal where you get an extra donut on every dozen, and we got 3 dozen, and man. Between me and her, we hammered all 3 dozen donuts in like 15 minutes. Because they were hot, you could just fold them in half, and they sell milk there too. So I've never been in so much pain in my life.
I was going to say, I bet your stomach was in bits afterwards. I've got a similar story.
After 18 weeks of dieting or so, yeah. I mean,
yeah, I've got a similar story. My the last 3 shows that I've done, one of my best friends, Kirsty, she's bought me a box of 12 Krispy Kremes. The last 3 shows in a row is like a little tradition.
Yeah, they're great.
I remember after the second show, I think I did like 11 of them, just sat in bed after the show. I did like either 10 or 11 of them. Blood sugars just went crazy, pretty much passed out sort of thing, fell asleep. And I remember waking up at like 1:30 in the morning, went to go to the toilet, saw this box. I might as well finish the other one, so... Yeah,
we were sweating. You're
pouring with sweat, like
hands were shaking.
Yeah,
it was like that.
It's crazy.
Well, bodybuilding's different. In powerlifting, I always did. In powerlifting, we do weight cuts. So you make weight, then you have 24 hours to get your weight back up before you start. So it's basically like an eating contest that lasts the whole day. And also the hydration and so forth of getting the fluids back in you. So you have an IV, you're like jamming Doritos in your face, eating rice every hour on the hour. Yeah. So it's more of a rigid, structured thing there. Whereas bodybuilding, once it's done, it's done.
It's done. Yeah, it's over and done. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's done. Yeah.
What about your favorite drink? Do you have a go-to alcoholic drink?
Alcoholic drink. My favorite alcoholic drink. I like really good cognac, so I like Fontenay cognac.
Yeah.
I also like, but that's hard to get, I have to order that. They don't sell that at liquor stores or anything here. Mm-hmm. As far as like liquor that I could buy in the store, I like whiskey. I'm a fan of Woodford, like Woodford Reserve.
I've got 2 bottles of that in my cupboard, actually.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Krispy Kreme, Woodford Reserve. Glad I got you on.
Yeah, I like bourbon. Yeah, that would probably be it. I'm also a fan of wine, so I'll drink red wines. Mm-hmm. But
last question: who should we have on our podcast next?
Who should you have on next?
Yeah,
that's a good question. Let me think here. You caught me off guard here because I would definitely say Paul. That's what
we beat you to it with that one.
He's my go-to person with that because he's very interesting. I would say, why don't you bring Brandon? Do you know who Brandon Lilly is?
Yeah.
He's another good friend of mine, or Greg Panora is my partner. Also, he's a good person to talk to. He's another powerlifting coach. He's my other fifth set guy. He's got a really good story. He's been through a lot of adversity and struggles. He had a stroke at 29 years old.
Oh, wow.
And came back, and he's still kicking ass, man. He's benching. He benched 580 pounds in a meet, since I've been working with him, and he did. He was very close to getting a 585 bench this past weekend, but just barely missed it. So that's him. If you want to talk to an older woman, I have a very interesting 65-year-old woman I work with.
Yeah, this would be great. Yeah,
Ellen Stein. She's very interesting. She's 65 years old and outlives most girls that are in their 20s and 30s that are powerlifters. She's a top-ranked, top 5, regardless of age.
Wow.
She totaled 1035 this weekend raw.
Wow, that's strong.
And I mean, she looks like a little granny. You would never expect her to be able to do the stuff she can do, but she's a piece of work. Her stories are, she's got a lot of good stories. They just did a documentary on her, so she's somebody else that I would also say is interesting.
Perfect. They're 3 great recommendations. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah,
so Swede, where can people find out about you? Where can they buy the Fifth Method? Please.
Okay, the Fifth Step book, the Fifth Step Method, the original book is available on Amazon. So you can Google Fifth Step Method for powerlifting or Fifth Step. It should come right up. My stuff, as far as my personal social media stuff, obviously it's MF Swede, on Instagram. And Swede Burns on everything else. So you can just Swede Burns on Facebook. Feel free to follow me on there. I don't think I can add any more people, but you can follow. And Instagram is a really good way to get a hold of me. I even try to respond to DMs, as scary as it is to go into the.
Well, I slid into your DMs.
Yeah, you slid in. That's how you go in there. But I mean, the thing is, there'll be 30 requests for people that I don't follow.
Okay.
So I go through it. I try and just real quick, make sure there's nothing that looks creepy, and then I'm like, all right. So you open the wrong thing. It can be really surprising. I put on there. I do this thing on Facebook sometimes, Tales from the DM, where I read my Instagram DMs because I get some insane, just mind-boggling shit from people that are fan people.
Go on, give us a good story.
Okay. Oh my God, I got one from this guy. He starts, "Hey, what's up?" It always starts real nice. It always starts sort of cordial. Hey, big fan of yours. I like your stuff, like your lifting. You might know. Then maybe they'll do some name dropping. You might know this guy that I know. Well, of course, now you never know who it is. Just trying to name drop somebody they know, and then it'll continue. They'll just keep messaging, and it's just sort of having this conversation with themselves.
Yeah.
Without you ever responding or reading anything. So as far as they know, because I don't push the allow button and accept it, they don't know I've ever even seen it. And it'll just keep going. They'll keep having conversations, and gradually they get more and more mad until eventually they're like, "Oh, these stupid videos of yourself, I hate your guts. It's just I'm unfollowing you now. That's it." And then I had this one guy who starts just like that. "Oh, you might know my friend." And then it was also some creepy stuff "I'm somebody that you might like to be friends with. I'm 6 foot tall, 215 pounds, 9% body fat." I'm like, dude, if you're giving me your fucking stats in the first interaction, we can't be friends, I'm not interested in talking to you. So I didn't respond, obviously, and he continues to go on with it. And he told me about 11 times that he wasn't gay throughout the course of that conversation. Just keeps pushing back. Yeah, I have a wife and kids, it just keeps going on with that. I'm like, okay, dude, I'm not responding because it was there were enough red flags, for me to But anyway, it starts real nice, and then he starts to get really, fuck you, all these. He starts with the, I'm deleting you, I'm unfollowing you, and he's still commenting on everything even after he claimed that he unfollowed me. Because I start putting 2 and 2 together that this guy's totally out of his mind.
Yeah,
then he has a breakdown and starts telling me, "You're a loser. You're old. You're never gonna have a family. You're you're too concerned with. You're in some other state looking at a pond, and I've got a pond in my backyard." Dude, it was just so pathetic, all the things. So I put it up. I was like, listen, I mentioned it in a post, and people were like, you should read it. So I pulled it up on my iPad and made a video and read it on Facebook. And that was the first Tales from the DM. I mean, it basically it reminds me of that Eminem song "Stan."
Yeah.
It starts off real good, and then it just turns into where he's more and more mad. And this guy that's a rapper made a whole song about that Tales from the DM thing. Of everything. Really? He made a video and posted it too. But it basically ended with him just going apeshit, just going totally crazy, but still following me. Eventually, I had to block him. There was. Over the course of 6 weeks, there were probably 40 messages with no response. Wow. I'm just getting more and more mad. So, yeah, it was pretty funny. He's coming at me, and I'm like, man, do you realize that you are having a conversation with yourself in my fucking DMs telling me what a shit I am? Bizarre, and there's a lot of them. So it's hard to wade through that stuff. I try to do my best sort of, to wade through all that. And answer the people. There are a lot of people out there that are reaching out because they have legitimate questions. So I do every day when I have my coffee in the morning, I'll sit in my kitchen and I'll go through the DMs and I'll try and find if there's something that's like a question about fifth set or something like that. I'll at least direct them. Unfortunately, I can't answer every question because there's so many questions.
Yeah, of course.
I'll end up, it would be an extra 4 hours of work a day for me to intelligently answer all the different questions that I get. So what I do is I point them towards resources. Like, we have a group on Facebook that's like a community of people that use fifth set. So like basic questions that people have, I'm like, join that group and get in there. It's, it's like 500 people or so that are in the group, and, they all are willing to help, or they seem to be friendly and helpful. And if there's any issues, they can tag me. And if I comment and explain it in there, everybody gets to see it. So I'm not, so I'm not doing just one person's answer at a time, because I work with 30 people at a time. Yeah. So any given day I have 15 people's videos to review because they typically train every other day. So I got about 4 hours of video review to do every day. And then I do about 4 hours of writing and other work, every day. Yeah. And that notwithstanding, I still have to travel and do seminars constantly with Greg and I. Yeah, so it's a lot. There's a lot going on. So there's only so much. People get offended when you don't answer their stuff, and I'm like, man, if you had any idea what my day looks like, it's very hard for me to find time to do this. I do my best. I do my best, and I don't charge for any of that stuff. I don't, the only people I charge are the people that I work with that retain me as their coach. I put out a lot of free content. I spend, if you look at my authors page on Elite FTS, there's probably 65 full articles on there that are, a lot of them are just manuals, of how to deal with certain problems, or some of it is just me talking about a certain topic. The thing is, like, it's funny. I talked to Dave Tate about this years ago, and it's very true. As a coach or as a trainer, you're going to run into you're going to get in the course of your career, you're going to get over 100,000 questions from different people, right? But it's the same 15 questions.
Yeah.
It's the same 15 problems again and again. And that was what made me want to sort of systemize this stuff and write the books, is because, these are things that, like, I'm limited in that I'm one human being, and I'm only able to communicate and connect with so many people in person or on a one-on-one basis. But if I write books, everybody can read them, even when I'm dead, people can still learn from me, Yeah. Amazing is that,
Great.
You read stuff that the Greeks wrote thousands of years ago, and you feel like you knew them. You can read their stories and experiences and feel like you know that person, and they died long before I was ever thought of. So it's interesting to me to have that. And I've done my best to, like I said, to systemize and how would I answer every question and provide all those answers correctly. Someday I would like to pull away entirely. I have enough resources of information, move on to other things, because I think I have exhausted this. I think I've solved all the problems that I know of,
Yeah, for sure.
I have answers for every question. And I'm not trying to be at all self-aggrandizing with that. I don't think that I'm anything special, but I think that we take what is a very simple problem and try to turn it into something that's more complex, oftentimes just to justify our own existence as teachers.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, you see it time and time again across social media, trying to make yourself sound smarter than what you are.
Yeah. The goal of any teacher should be to take what is complicated information, convoluted, and make it as easy as possible for the average person to digest. And when you have a situation where now there are entire groups of people that are making a living by taking relatively simple information and trying to make it, trying to add a layer of complexity to it, that's a problem.
Yeah.
The average person doesn't know, and they see, okay, well, this person's recognized as an expert. They must be doing this right. And a lot of times it's just not the case. It's really very simple. A lot of these things are really very simple, to explain, to manipulate, to operate, to work within the guidelines of a methodology is a very easy thing to do.
It sounds like you're on the same wavelength as us. Keeping things simple, breaking things down,
Logical people.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, logical people, Krispy Kremes, bourbon, all good with me. So
I mean, I love sushi too. I was on the line with sushi, but bodybuilding stories for eating is definitely better because it always comes down
It's
to
more real, yeah.
donuts and cookies and shit that you've been dreaming about, you know?
yeah,
The average person can't relate to dreaming about food, you know?
yeah, it's true. Yeah, until you've done like a full
Fantasizing, yeah.
yeah,
No.
100%.
No.
Thank you so much for the time that you've afforded us today.
No, it's
Really appreciate it. It's been great.
been great
Nice
chatting.
going through a few different areas rather than just talk about pure training. Nice
Yeah.
getting the mindset behind it and stuff like that. We love that. Thank you so much.
I like this a lot better doing it this way. It can be rigid dealing the other way, and it's just boring. This is good.
Yeah, we try and make this a bit more conversational. So I'm glad that it come across like that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Swede. Really appreciate it.
Great talking with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Akash, do you want to quickly do the outro?
Yeah, you can find us on @RNT_fitness on Instagram, or @AdamHaley1, or @Akash Fagela. And if you want to hit our website up for content, you can go to www.rntfitness.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode with Swede, please share it with your friends and hit subscribe. Thank you.